What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another video, and today we are going to be showing you how to replace the mirrors on your McLaren 570s or 600 LT. For those of y'all wondering why we're doing this car came with the standard painted mirrors, and we're actually going to be replacing them with these here, which are carbon fiber, to add a little bit of accents to the car, and it looks nice. So in this video, we're going to be going into detail about how to remove the mirror itself from the car, and then how to replace the casing of the mirror with a different one, which you'd have here. Now these are McLaren branded mirrors. These aren't aftermarket, so we shouldn't have any fitment issues. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started with removing the mirror from the car. So in order to get the mirror off the car, we're gonna have to remove the door panel first. And the first step to do that is gonna be to remove this speaker housing surround. This is what the surround looks like once you take it off the car. On the back of it, there's a bunch of metal clips. The trick to taking this off is starting on one side and rattling it just a little bit while you're removing it and working your way down. Don't go from one corner and peel it off, otherwise you're gonna damage it. Just start from one place and then work your way down, and eventually it'll pop off. So now that we have the speaker housing off, you're gonna wanna remove the speaker. There's 3 T25 screws surrounding the speaker, so just pop those out and then we'll be able to unclip the speaker and continue on. This is what the wire plugged into the speaker looks like. Really simple to remove. There's no clips you have to push down, just gently wiggle it out. So from here, what we're gonna be doing is trying to get to all the 7 bolts that we're gonna have to remove to get the door panel off. And one of them is behind this little airbag cover. So let me show y'all how we get this off. This part is a little tricky. What we did is we took a little flathead screwdriver, put painter's tape around it, and also put painter's tape here on the door panel. And then we reach underneath here and we could start to pop it up. Now be patient here. And then eventually you can work your way around and get this little plastic panel removed. So this piece here is connected with a little piece of plastic, so you won't actually be able to fully pull it out, but now we can access this bolt. This piece here is going to be a very similar process to the previous piece. Like the airbag one, I recommend going in around the seam. You have a little bit easier time getting under there to pry it off. And we're gonna be using the same flathead screwdriver with a little bit of painter's tape wrapping around the screwdriver. This is what the back of this speaker housing looks like. Again, very similar to the other speaker housing, we have these metal clips. The trick to this is once you get it off, see if any of these metal tabs here are bent up. If they are, carefully push them back down. The odds of breaking this is super high when you're bending it back down because the metal's so thin. So like I said, just be very, very cautious when you're bending it back down. Hi, Sam Dog. Now it's time to get this black piece removed. There's really no good way of removing it without dinging it up just a little bit. In this case, we're gonna use a pick. We've tried a lot of other methods to get this removed, and either it takes way too long or it just doesn't work. So a pick is probably what I'd recommend in order to remove this. And all you do is you just get under there and you start prying a little bit, and then try to be gentle. There's no point in messing it up more than you have to. This is what the clip we were removing looks like. You can see there's no real way of getting underneath it besides for some sort of pick, and it's very, very thin plastic, so it's easy to chew up like it is there. So just be careful, take your time, and then eventually you'll get it off. At this point, we're gonna remove the door panel, and in order to do that, there's gonna be 7 8mm bolts that you're gonna have to remove. First one is here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 7th one is kind of behind here, tucked there, 7. These 7 bolts all have a floating washer on it, so just be careful when you're removing them that the washer doesn't fall off. At this point, we're gonna want to roll down all the windows. Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to get access to the 3 bolts that hold the mirror on. Just like that. Now, what you're doing is you're popping the door panel out of these, or you're popping these red clips out from the door. And so that part's a little bit tricky and you may mess them up. If you do, we went to AutoZone and actually bought some of these before we started because it's a really easy clip to break. Next step's gonna be to remove the electrical connectors for the window. The door panel. Nice. Feed the top through the hole. So from this part of the door panel, you're removing the electrical connector from this spot. And this is what it looks like. There's no clip on one side and a clip on the other. So you just push that down like that and then you can pull it out. Now we're gonna move on to remove the speaker. And before you get that off, just to make your life a little easier, you have to remove these clips here. All you have to do is push the top pins up while you remove it. And they'll pop out. So now we're gonna remove the 4 4mm bolts for the speaker. Now that the speaker's out, we have access to remove the 3 bolts that are holding on the mirror. So this is why we wanted the window down, because if it was up, you wouldn't be able to reach these 3 bolts. These are 8mm bolts, so now we're gonna remove them. It's gonna be a little bit tricky, so just be mindful not to scratch the window. It's loose and all the 3 bolts are undone. We're gonna plug back in the door panel so now we can roll back up the window. If you're doing this on the passenger side, you won't have to plug it back in. You could just use the driver's door, but in this case, it does have to get plugged back in order to roll the window up. So that way we could unplug the electrical connections for the mirror. You're gonna wanna unplug the electrical connections from the mirror. This is a little bit tricky. What you're gonna do is remove this connector here, and then you're gonna be working with the electrical connector that goes to the mirror. And you're gonna slide it off this little connection point. And then once you've done that, you can feed this wire through this hole here and then remove the mirror. Once you've done that, you can do whatever you have to do to the mirror. We're gonna be showing you how to replace this housing. We've moved over to the bench now, and the first part of the disassembly of the mirror is gonna be to take this piece off. In order to do that, the first step's gonna be to remove this rubber grommet. And then once we've done that, there's gonna be 2 T10 bolts or screws that we're gonna remove. That gives us access to pull that off, right? Yep. Boom. There's 4 screws to remove. One's a T20 there, and the other one's gonna be a T15. So two are T15 up top, and the 2 lower ones are T20. Removing the 2 lower ones is going to give you access to pull off that orange piece. Removing these 2 T20 screws is going to allow you to pull back this piece. And then there's going to be 4 T15 screws holding this black piece to the mirror. Now you're going to remove the 3 T20 screws in order to pull off the mirror motor. And then over here. So you can see we have the mirror up here now, and the next step is going to be to plug it back in. You can see it's plugged in now. What we ended up doing was we took the female end of the wiring harness and slid it onto its connection from the bottom up, and then we were able to plug in the wire from the mirror, which is the male end, into the female end. Before you put this panel back on, just confirm that you have 4 of these red clips in the door. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you don't see one, odds are it's probably still somewhere inside where the clips end up on the door. So just look for it. If it is, it's nice to have a proper or the right tool to remove it. We have a bunch of these. Otherwise, you may end up breaking it while removing it, and then you're gonna have to replace it with these yellow ones. So we actually got 2 different parts for replacement clips. The first one is for a Jeep and the next one is for a Nissan. We like the Jeep ones because the clip itself is just a bit more sturdy compared to the Nissan, but we like the Nissan because there's this little foam grommet piece that you can put over the Jeep one and then just push it in. These are relatively cheap and you're not going to be able to get McLaren parts, at least at your local AutoZone, but this works just fine. So here's the replacement. And then here's the OE, pretty similar. Before you put this panel back on, just confirm that you have 4 of these red clips in the door. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you don't see one, odds are it's probably still somewhere inside where the clips end up on the door. So just look for it. If it is, it's nice to have a proper or the right tool to remove it. We have a bunch of these. Otherwise, you may end up breaking it while removing it, and then you're gonna have to replace it with these yellow ones. Make sure you feed the speaker wire through the hole when you're putting the door panel back on, and then be mindful of where these clips are going into when you're pushing the door panel in.
Set it in from the top first, and then you clip it in from the bottom.
I haven't been videoing too much because this is a pretty similar process, just backwards. But when you're putting the speaker covers in, just be mindful of where the clips are lining up. So there's the lower one, and then we're gonna do a very similar process for the top one. When we were removing the driver's side door, this thing has a few extra metal pieces here. So we heard them fall off when we were removing it, and so now we found them in the door panel and we're putting them back on. They go on a specific way, obviously. You can see the 2 pins or two pointy pieces.
You can see the indentation on the clip. That lines up with the piece on the housing.
And then make sure you're installing it the right direction. The tonneau buttons are lower than the rest of the buttons. And after an hour and a half of work, the mirror housing is replaced. I hope you all enjoyed this how-to. I figured I'd go ahead and show you guys how we did it, because there's not a really good video on YouTube yet about how to actually replace the housing. This was one of the mods that we had planned for the car. I think it looks a fair bit better. The carbon fiber looks nice, and it's a decent accent overall and makes the car look a little bit more mean. We did it on both sides. Each side takes about an hour and a half or so, depending upon how handy you are and how well and how much you know about working on these cars. It's really not that bad. I don't remember how much time the dealership was saying this would take. I think they wanted 4 hours to do both. I could be wrong. So we figured we'd go ahead and do these. It's a fun project, and again, it really wasn't as hard as it may have seemed. Let me know what you guys think about the new look in the comment section down below. If you like this video, go ahead, drop a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments down below. I'll try to answer them as quickly as possible. Thanks for watching. Peace.